We wanted to make sure we mentioned Robert Allen Arthur,
Yeah.
who had worked in New York in live television, and he worked with you on the Patty Duke Show, didn't he?
He didn't work with me, but he was somehow involved as an executive on the show. We didn't do any actual work together.
Mm-hmm. Writing all the scripts for the show, you used some pseudonyms. I think that's rather interesting.
That was on I Dream of Jeannie.
Oh, it was. We'll get to that then.
Yeah.
Okay. How long was the show, was Patty Duke on the air?
3 years.
3 years. Why did
And
it
there
go
was,
off?
there was dissension in the company, and they moved to California, and it ended. Someone didn't want to go on with it. I don't know whether it was Patty or who it was, but
Did you
it
move
ended.
with it to California? Did you?
I'm sorry?
Did you move with it, or were you already in California?
I moved to New York,
Mm-hmm.
and I was commuting between New York and the Beverly Hills Hotel.
So when the show went off the air, you came back.
I was
from New
I was doing Junie. I was going up and back all the
Oh,
time
of
anyway.
course. Yes, you mentioned that. Yeah. And how did you get the idea for I Dream of Jeannie?
There had been Jeannie shows before, but it was always Burl Ives coming out of a bottle. I thought it'd be fun to have a beautiful, nubile, half-naked girl coming out saying, "What can I do for you, master?"
Yes. Okay.
Are we on?
Yes, we're on. I just seem to have covered the microphone with my necktie or something, but we're all right.
Want to repeat that?
No, that continue.
All right. What happened was the network realized that what they had bought was the story of a half-naked girl living with a bachelor saying, "What can I do for you?" And those were in very unpermissive times,
Mm-hmm.
and they panicked.
Mm-hmm.
I immediately got a 15-page letter saying, "Don't let him touch her, don't let him look at her here, make sure." It went on and on and on. So I shot the show, and they looked at it, and then I got a 3-page letter. And after that, no letters. I wasn't trying to get away with anything sexy. I was doing a comedy.
You know, I'm going to come back to that in just a minute, Sidney, because there were a couple of things on the Patty Duke Show that I wanted to talk about, and I didn't get to, was the way in which it was shot. Was it a 3-camera show, do you recall, or was it one camera?
I remember it as 1 camera.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember where you shot it in New York? Did they have a studio?
At a studio, and I don't remember the name of it. I do remember that a secretary went to work one morning, first time on the job, went out to lunch, was mugged, came back, a rat ran over her foot. She quit that day.
So you were in a pretty dismal part of town.
Pretty dismal part of town.
What about the music for the opening titles of the Patty Duke Show, which everyone knew and sang? Were you responsible for any part of that?
Ron Raymond. Not Ron Raymond, I'm sorry. Sid Raymond.
Sid Raymond.
Was responsible for that.
Mm-hmm.
He did a wonderful job.
What were your day-to-day duties on the show? Did you just concentrate on writing and that was it?
Concentrated on writing.
Were you on the set at all?
I went on the set occasionally, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But writers really weren't welcomed on the set.
Did the show begin in L.A. or did it begin in...
It began in New York because in L.A. they restricted the hours of juveniles severely. In New York, they didn't care if you killed them. You could shoot all day and night.
That's an interesting point, yeah. Very interesting. So that's why the show was done in New York.
Right.
Mm-hmm. How long before, well, you said like almost the 3rd year they then moved to
Yeah,
LA.
we had 3 years.
Why did they move to L.A. from New York?
Mainly because of me.
Mm-hmm.
I kept bugging them. L.A. was my home, and I wanted to be back there, and I worked on Patty. She had never seen a garden, and I said, "Patty, you'll have your own garden there, beautiful patios, everything." So finally she said to the producer, "I want to move to California." I had found a house that I was going to move into, but I told Patty about it, and she and her manager moved into it.
So you moved into another house.
Right.
You wrote how many, 78 episodes of that show?
I didn't count them. I don't
How did you
know.
do that?
A lot.
Weren't you exhausted?
No, I loved it.
Uh-huh.
I would write a show a day. When I was working on Jeannie, I had a secretary come to the house around lunchtime. In the morning, I would get an idea for a plot, and then dictate to her. And then I would end it at a point where the master, Larry Hagman, was in terrible trouble, because that was the fun of it. And I didn't know how he was going to get out of it. But I knew the deeper he was in, the more fun it would be to get him out, and the more the audience would enjoy it. So after lunch, I would give it a little thought and dictate the end of it. She'd type it up, and there was another script.
You dictated dialogue as well? Everything?
Everything. Shots, dialogue, sure.
That was unheard of at that time. What about the merchandising on the Patty Duke show? Were you involved in any of that at all?
Yeah, I don't remember how much merchandising there was.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I had a piece of both shows.
Mm-hmm. And then I think when was it? Well, it was 99. You did a reunion show of the Patty Duke. Did you work on that?
No, they didn't invite me, and I didn't do it.
Well, why was that? I mean,
I have no idea. I just heard that they had done it.
Why did they do it after 30 years? I mean, the audience's memory of shows like that, does it carry over? I mean, what was their idea of doing it, you know?
Henry, you'll have to ask them.
Okay, I think you're right. Let's go to I Dream of Jeannie, because there's a lot to be talked about there, and we got started with how you got the idea. You said you didn't want to do a Burl Ives coming out of the bottle kind of thing. You picked a beautiful lady. How did you come about selecting Barbara Eden?
They brought her in, and I knew she was perfect.
Had she been in a film or something, a feature film that you saw?
She had done a few things, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did Screen Gems give you any specific guidelines for the show at that time, or what they wanted? No.
None.
So it was totally up to you.
They didn't know how much trouble they were going to be in. I just gave them a complete script.
Mm-hmm. Was Jackie Cooper running the Screen
Jackie
Gems?
Cooper was running the studio.
Mm-hmm. How'd you get along with him?
Got along fine.
Mm-hmm. You never talked about his old days with Jackie Coogan, or?
No.
You didn't have to. The character of that Larry Hagman played, Major Anthony Nelson, how did that come to you? I mean,
well, to create comedy, you have to have a conflict. If he had played the part of a salesman who had found a genie, there's no conflict. It's not funny. But to have the master someone who was in the military and has to subscribe to certain rules and can't be seen to do anything outrageous without being thrown out of the service, that becomes funny. So I made him a member of NASA.
How did you do that? I mean, why not just a straight military guy? I mean,
because I thought NASA was more up to date, funnier, because they were very strict. And we shot some of the scenes. We got backgrounds at Cocoa Beach. The astronauts were big fans of the show. Some of them came to the wedding in the 5th year.
How did you convince NASA to let you use them in the background? I mean, use them for...
I'm not sure we had much to do with them in the beginning. I think they just let us go. Uh-huh. And I didn't get into what I can't do.
You didn't have to get your scripts okayed by them or anything?
No, not at all.
Mm-hmm. And did you ever go down to
yeah, I went down there. We went down. Had
NASA?
a good time. Yeah, I went inside a capsule.
Cape Canaveral, is that where you went?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you were getting all the atmosphere and feeling of what was going on.
Right. And it was very up to date because NASA was very much in the public eye.
Did they have a consultant on the show from NASA?
No.
You didn't need it?
No. I made up the things I wanted to make up about going into space.
How long was it, Sidney, between the time you gave Screen Gems the idea and you got the show on the air? I mean, or you made the pilot?
I didn't give them the idea. I gave them a full script, and they right ahead. And it was really months, and we were on our way. They sold it to a network.
Mm-hmm. And what about the other cast members? Let's talk about them briefly. How did you settle on Larry Hagman? Because you had other people in mind too. I think you tested some other people.
Yeah, Larry was not a comedian. He was an actor, and was very good. and gave it the solidity that I felt it needed.
And believability.
Exactly. Bill Daly was a stand-up comic. And I had another, and I'm sorry about this, I had a third. And then when I saw the pilot, I realized I didn't need the third one, so I had to let someone go who could have been in a hit series. And I was sorry about that. What happened was, the first day of shooting, I had the director was the Warner Brothers star.
Well, we'll come back to that. We'll find it.
Okay. First day of shooting, he called me and asked me to come down to the set. And I went down, first day of shooting. And I said, what's the problem? And he said, I'm quitting. I can't work with actors who don't know their lines. And I was furious. I called Larry Hagman aside. And I said, how dare you come on the set the first day of shooting and not know your lines? And he said, I know my lines. He said, I just thought we would kind of improvise some lines. And I said, Larry, this is television. You don't improvise. Say your lines. And he said, okay. And I went over to Bill Daly and I said, how dare you not know your lines? He said, I'm not used to memorizing lines. He said, I'm a stand-up comic. So we got him a tape recorder, and he taped his lines and played them in his car on the way to the studio and back. And it worked out fine, but we almost lost them.
Some of the other people in the show, we should talk about the other cast. Can you talk about them? Well, there were a couple of names that I see here in the research. That Robert Conrad was considered for the Larry Hagman part.
Mm-hmm.
Gary Collins was tested. Darren McGavin. Do you remember any of that?
Yeah, they were all good, and
I think McGavin turned it down.
I don't remember that, but it seemed to me that Larry gave it the most believability.
Mm-hmm. And did Bill Asher direct quite a few of them?
Bill, as I remember, didn't direct any of them.
Oh, he didn't. Okay.
He directed Bewitched.
Mm-hmm. Was he never worked on I Dream of Jeannie then?
No.
No. Okay. The opening of the show was animation, and it was done by Fritz Freeling. How did that come about?
I thought that they were the best in the business, and no one had ever used them for this kind of show. I mean, they did big movies. So I approached them and asked them if they'd be interested in this. And they thought it was a good way to get into television, which they really hadn't thought about. So they did it, and did a wonderful job.
It was a terrific opening.
Yeah.
And so was the music. You had some other writers on the show working with you, Joe Bonaducci, Irma Kalish.
And who?
And Irma Kalish.
Yeah.
Did they work with you on I Dream of Jeannie?
Well, when you say work with me,
did you have
I
them
didn't
doing
believe
scripts?
in multiple writers. I had one writer or one team do a script. And I was the producer, so naturally I approved it, amended it, did whatever I had to do.
So you would assign scripts freelance or just with the team? You had the team there.
No, I had no regulars.
Mm-hmm.
I just hired them as I needed them.
I see.
If I wasn't doing the script myself. I had so many, you'd referred to this before, I had so many credits. It was created by Sidney Sheldon, a Sidney Sheldon production, copyrighted by Sidney Sheldon, written by Sidney Sheldon. I was embarrassed. Usually in Hollywood you fight for credits. I was fighting to get some of my credits off the screen. So I called the Guild and I gave them three names, known to plumes. The only one I remember is Joe Galato. I don't remember who the others were, and told them that I'd be writing under those names. So I used those credits.
Now, early on, Barbara Eden got pregnant somewhere near the beginning of the show when it went on the air. How did you handle that?
I was at a dinner party, and she called one evening and said, I have to see you. So I said, all right, I'll be at the office in the morning. She said, no, I have to see you tonight. And I knew there was trouble. So she came over to the house and said, I'm going to have a baby. and we had already started shooting. So I pushed the panic button, and what we did was to shoot bits of scenes from the chest up. And another thing happened that was very interesting. I was about to go to Europe, and Jackie Cooper called me in. He said, we've just done another AFI, whatever it's called, AFI test. The first one had gone through the roof. And he said, this one is way down. They think she's too bossy. They don't like the show. So I canceled my trip to Europe, and I went onto the stage, and I rewrote scenes where she had a close-up, and I made her softer and nicer and changed the whole tone. And when they tested it again, it went through the roof again. So we almost lost that show. But as far as Barbara was concerned, I shot close-ups of her because we couldn't shoot below, and cut him into it and got away with it. It was a close thing. She was afraid I was going to let her go.
But how smart of you to realize that that was the course that you had to take. I mean, to make her softer and get people to like her more, because that's the secret behind television.
It worked.
Isn't it?
It worked.
Yeah, yeah. Larry Hagman could be difficult, couldn't he?
Yes.
Why do you think this was? I mean, why was he?
I remember the first day of shooting, we came back from the desert. We shot an outdoor scene. And we were in the company limo, and we stopped at a light, and there was a car from Kansas next to us. And Larry rolled down the window, and he yelled at them. He said, someday you're all going to know who I am. That burning ambition was in him. And he found himself in a show with a half-naked, beautiful girl, and there was no way it could be his show. I tried. I wrote scripts that favored him, gave him most of the lines, and gave him the plot. And it was always Jeannie that they were interested in. So he became, over 5 years, very frustrated. And it came out in anger.
Did he try to tell you how to write the script?
No, I didn't let anyone do that. What I did was to have a reading of the scripts and then say to the cast, tell me any problem you have and I'll solve it now. And when there was a silence or I listened to suggest, I said, okay, if you want any changes, you have the director call me. I wouldn't let them change the script because actors are not good ad-libbers. Writers spend a lot of time doing what they do and they know what they're doing if they're good. And I don't want actors improving on it.
As they do on other shows where they
Oh,
have
yeah,
complete
sure.
power. Who were some of the directors that worked on the show? Do you recall?
Very few.
Yeah.
The first director, whose name I'm trying to think of, was a singing, dancing star at Warner Brothers.
Gene Nelson.
Gene Nelson. And Hal Cooper and Claudio Guzman were about the only directors on the show. Gene Nelson was the first director. I talked to Norman Jewison, who was a picture director, never done television, and he read the script and said, I want to do it. And he met with the business people at Screen Gems, and he wanted a piece of it, and they wouldn't give it to him. So he bowed out. So Gene Nelson came on. Gene created the style, the ambience, everything that was wonderful about the show. I fired him after about the, I don't know, 7th, 8th, 9th show.
Why?
Because I came on the set one day and he was screaming at an elderly prop man. What had happened was I wrote a scene where the prop man has to get a persimmon, and it's Larry gives a persimmon to Barbara or vice versa, and he couldn't find a persimmon. And Gene is screaming at this man. The man's crying. And I was so angry. I said to Gene, it could be an apple. It could be a banana. I mean, to do this to this man. I said, I want to see you in my office when you're through. And he came up to the office. I said, you're fired. And he wrote a note of apology to the cast for his behavior. He got carried away with himself. And I don't think there's any excuse for anyone being abusive on a set. And I don't stand for that. So he was out.
Did he get along with all the actors, though? I mean, did he
He
get
got along fine with the actors.
with Hagman? Did he get along okay?
As far as I know.
Yeah.
But, there could have been things that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah. Now, did you write all the episodes for I Dream of Jeannie as you did on the Patty Duke show?
Not all of them. I brought in writers.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote, I'd say, most of them.
Who are some of the other writers you brought in?
I couldn't tell you their
Okay.
names.
All right.
There were two brothers I remember, and I don't remember their names.
Mm-hmm.
But all the credits are available.
How did you juggle your responsibilities for the Patty Duke show and I Dream of Jeannie? How did
I
you
just
manage that?
flew up and back
Uh-huh.
and kept the scripts flowing.
Mm-hmm. And you never got behind at all
Never.
on scripts?
Never got back. In fact, we came in ahead of budget on Jeannie every year, and we used the same tricks Bewitched used, and they were over budget every year. I would hear what the problems were, what the budget breakers were, and I would simplify it so that we could get under.
Did you stick to the same sets for every show, or did you vary it? I mean, did you take...
No,
you said-
we had different sets, but generally we use one stage and use the same sets as a rule, but added sets.
You said you were on location in the desert for...
Yeah,
one
well,
scene.
that was a little different. That wasn't a set. It was a real outdoor location shot.
Mhm.
That was, I think, that could have been the scene where, the opening scene where he found Jeannie, but I don't remember exactly.
It might have been for the pilot then that you did that.
Yeah,
But during the production of the show,
pretty much the
you
same.
stayed on the,
sets.
on the same stage. Can you describe the weekly schedule on the show? I mean, how many days you rehearsed before you... I guess you didn't have any rehearsal, really. You went right on camera, didn't you?
No.
Did you rehearse?
We did, and I don't want to be inaccurate, so I'm not going to tell you.
Okay.
I think we rehearsed for a couple days and shot for 3, but I'm not sure, and I don't want to have that go down as...
Yeah, I was going to ask you whether it was a 3-day, 4-day.
No, I don't remember.
At Screen Gems, because they were pretty forceful with their budgets. I worked there for a while. I know that they try to restrict the half-hour shows to a 3-day shooting schedule.
Yeah, that probably was ours, but I don't remember the details.
There was a man there by the name of Seymour Friedman. Do you remember him?
Oh,
He went around
the
at night.
wound, the pain.
He went around at night turning the lights out. And where people
Well,
had left
Seymour,
them
when I came there to do the pilot from New York, I said to him, I need a secretary. And he said, no. So I went out and hired a secretary. And Monday morning, I have 2 secretaries, mine and his that he hired. He just had to say no automatically. Yeah, I knew Seymour very well.
The story also goes, and I don't know whether it affected your show, that for budgetary reasons, because he didn't want to spend the money, shows were shot in black and white well after color had come in. Did you know about that?
No, what affected me was a little different. The first year of Jeannie, all the networks were going to color. The only 2 black and white shows on our network were a show about ships at sea, a Navy show, and Jeannie. So I went to whoever it was in charge, and I said, we should be in color. He said, no, it's too expensive. I said, I will pay for it. And he said, I don't want you to waste your money, meaning they thought the show would be out the next year. They had no faith in it. So our first season is shot in black and white. Then we went to color and spent 5 years.
And they Screen Gems lost hundreds of thousands of dollars because they couldn't syndicate the shows that were in black and white because everyone was showing color at that time.
Yeah.
Shows you about executive decisions. Talk to us about the sets that you did use in Jeannie.
The sex?
The sets that you used.
Oh, sets.
Yeah, not sex, but sets.
Well, we created a bottle, beautiful bottle. A man named Dick Elbain was the fellow who did special effects. And he made this beautiful bottle, big enough for her to get in, and had a duplicate small bottle, which we used to pretend she was in that. That was a big part of our tricks. Then we would do tricks where we would build things that were oversized and put Jeannie behind it. So it looked as though, a vase towered over her, or a piano was enormous. Then we had, in general, their bedroom sets, the living room set, the kitchen set. And once when I wrote a show about an IRS man coming to the house because he was suspicious of what was going on, all these valuables suddenly appearing in the house of a major. And in that set, Jeannie wanted to please her master, so she blinked, and the house expanded into an enormous house with rooms and swimming pools and everything. So we would do tricks like that.
How did you do that? Did you go on?
It was all special effects.
You didn't go on location to shoot that?
No, all special effects.
Oh.
The special effects guys were great.
How many? Was it a one-camera show? Do you recall? Probably was. Yeah.
Yeah, it was one camera.
And you did some filming in Hawaii at some point, did you?
Yeah, I thought the cast, and not the cast so much, because I wanted to shoot 3 shows in Hawaii, but the directors should have a treat. So I brought the 2 directors, Claudio and Hal Cooper. I didn't need them both, but I brought them both over to Hawaii. And I started shooting shows with stars. I brought Milton Berle over to do a show. I don't remember all the stars I used, but I had a whole year of using stars.
Were you encouraged?
I know I used Sammy Davis. He was a fan of the show, and I asked him to do the show. And he said, yes. And then his agent called and said, he's not doing it for that salary. And I said, yes, he is, because everyone else is. And Sammy did the show.
Were the guest stars your idea, or did the network?
My idea.
And the network went along with it? Did they give you extra money in the budget for the guest stars?
No, I paid him $1.10 an hour. No, they did it because they wanted to do the show.
Did you have to make any big adjustments when you went from black and white to color in
None.
the second year?
None.
Everything
None.
stayed the
It was
same?
a pleasure, because the show should have been in color.
How closely did you follow the real space race that was going on? Did you try to mirror what was happening in the news?
No, I followed it because I was interested, but I didn't try to mirror it.
And you had no interference from the network or from the government in terms of what you were showing?
None at all.
You were a lucky man.
Yeah. Those days were different. I don't know if this is the time to get into it, but Today, if you want to talk about television today as opposed to then, we could do that later.
We want to, and we will talk about it a little later. We're going to pause now to change tapes.
Fine.
If